This is Behind the Mic with Rick Hampton.
Well, welcome into episode number 4. I am your host, Rick Hampton, and I thought we'd do things just a little bit different today. Normally, during this part of the show, I'm telling you who my guest is going to be on the episode, and before it's over, I will share that information. But today, you hear her voice throughout the entire show, and I wanted to introduce you to the lovely voice coming from the booth across from me over there, and she is freshly back from vacation. The voice of Behind the Mic with Rick Hampton podcast, it's Candace Marshall.
Hey, thanks, Rick, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Now, you just got back from vacation. Tell me about that, because of course I'm envious.
Well, we went to Orlando, and so my daughter is on a competitive cheer squad, and they got the opportunity to perform at Universal Studios. So we decided to make a family vacay out of it.
Nice. Okay, I did get to see some pictures, but tell me about some of the experience. Just tell me a little bit about it.
So we took a day and went to Disney World. Last time that my kiddos went, my daughter was only 2, so she didn't get to experience that. So we decided to take her again. Now my older one, he's 13, and he was too cool for Disney World this time.
Yeah.
So we did Disney World one day, and then we had never been to Universal before, so spent about a day and a half there and had a blast. It was a really different experience because everything's a lot more movie driven at Universal. So my husband was in heaven. They've got a brand new ride. It's the Fast and the Furious ride.
Cool.
So it's like you're a part of the movie.
Well, now it's been since 2004 since I've been to Disney World, and I will tell you that even then I fangirled. I didn't care. As soon as I saw Mickey Mouse, I'm like, dude, come here, man.
I'm just as bad as the kids.
In.
I got my picture with Ariel.
Nice.
Like I said, they've got the little autograph books, and I was just as pumped as my daughter going around getting all the autographs.
Awesome.
So,
That's cool.
We had a blast.
Yeah, see, I'm that way too. Ariel is one of my favorites, and then Jasmine are my two.
Jasmine was not there. We didn't have. Yeah. So sometimes they're at different parks. But Belle is my absolute favorite.
Nice.
So, and we actually got to eat at the Be Our Guest restaurant. They just put that in within the last 8 years.
Nice.
And so we got to stunk in some reservations last minute and had dinner at Belle's Castle.
Cool.
And the Beast is actually there at the castle as your host for dinner. So that was pretty awesome.
That is cool.
Yeah.
So that is very neat. Well, now a lot of people don't know it, but you and I work together now. I mean, just recently, which is exciting news. I'm excited about it. But just recently, you became the worship director at the church that I work for, Church That Matters in Sand Springs.
Yes, I'm super excited about the opportunity. We love being at Church That Matters, and just really excited for what God has in store for moving forward.
I'm looking forward to all of the team of the worship team to get together, and I can't wait. I think it's going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to it. And if you don't have a church home, I would love for you to be here in Sand Springs at Church That Matters. You can do that 3 West 41st Street, just a little plug there. But you're also plugged into the community because you're a teacher.
Yes.
Tell me about that a little bit.
So I teach at Angus Valley Elementary School here in Sand Springs, and have going into the fall will be my 10th year teaching. I've taught at some various schools. I was at Glenpool Middle School my very first year teaching, and quickly found out that middle school was not my calling in life. And so I transitioned to elementary, and that's what I love. Elementary music is my passion. I have pre-K through 5th grade, and I absolutely love it. 4th year back at Angus.
Angus, that's cool. That is very cool.
Yeah.
And I know that the kids love you. I know several kids that go there, and they love Miss Marshall.
Well, thank you. I love my kiddos. I call them my babies. They're just like my own kids, and I just love getting to just build relationships with them. It's more than just music class for me. I love just getting to be a part of their lives, and that's what truly matters to me.
That is so awesome. You know what? Thanks for being here with me, and it's time to put you back to work, okay?
All right.
Coming up in just a few minutes, we've got Rodney Lay Jr. on the show. He is going to walk us through his life. He has been around the world, literally, plus he spent a lot of time in Nashville. You'll hear some stories about that, and he has a famous dad as well who used to be on Hee Haw. We'll talk all about all of those things. Plus, he's going to play one of his hit songs live for us on the program, so you don't want to miss that. It is all coming up next. Candace, you ready?
I'm ready.
Guest crew, stand by. Cue Candace in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Behind the Mic with Rick Hampton podcast, brought to you by Mojo Merchandise. Join radio veteran Rick Hampton and his guests for informative and entertaining discussions as they take you behind the scenes, behind the stories, behind the music, and more. Originating from the Big Daddy Studios, it's time to go behind the mic, and here's your host, Rick Hampton.
Off and running with episode number 4. My special guest today is Rodney Lay Jr. Welcome in to Behind the Mic with Rick Hampton.
That Hampton boy and his happy mic.
Maybe I should have picked that as the title. You come from a rich classic country background. Your dad was a Rockabilly Hall of Fame member, band leader for country music legend Roy Clark for 20 years, and he also appeared on the program Hee Haw for many years as well, and I would love to have him on as a guest of the show as well. He is such a wealth of information in the music industry.
Just turn him on and he talks.
Without a doubt. I am excited to talk to you about not only your music career, but also your career in radio and kind of what led you to all of that as well. I know you've worked for several country music stars, including Roy Clark, Mel Tillis, Glen Campbell, Aaron Tippin, and Kentucky Headhunters, just to name a few. And, you know, one of the coolest things I think about you is that you were on a nationally televised tour in Poland, and you have won a Dove Award for the Gospel Music Association for Bluegrass Song of the Year for He Still Looks Over Me, which, by the way, I'm excited because you're going to perform that live in studio before you leave today. But let's get right down to your radio career, kind of where it started. Did music come first and then playing around and stuff and then radio?
Well, Rick, they kind of happened simultaneously. Okay. In high school, of course, I had bands growing up, little cover bands. And then one time, kind of as a dare from my friends, we were driving around Independence, Kansas. There was a station there called KIND, and I used to jokingly do a disc jockey voice, all that, you know, it's sunny and 78 degrees and all that nonsense.
Right.
And so they said, we dare you to go in there. And so I went in there and told the guy who I was. His name was Nelson Rupart. He knew who my dad was, and Dad had been on KGGF in Coffeyville years before that, and had a good little run there. And so Nelson hired me to do afternoon drive. So I came back out, I'm like, I've got a job.
I got his job.
So anyway.
This dare has become a job now.
That's what it was.
Wow.
So that's how that started. And
so how long were you there?
Oh, gosh, about 4 years.
Wow.
4 years in total. So,
yeah. And I say wow, and some people don't understand that, but I mean, in radio business, that's
really
a
long
big
now.
deal, right?
Yeah.
That is a long tenure, you know, especially then. So
right.
Okay, so you were there for 4 years, and then where did you head then?
Well, after that, I went to KXLS and did mornings in Enid, Oklahoma, and then after that, fell in love, you know, with this gal from Independence. I came back from KXLS, went back to work for KIND for just a smidge, went to school to further my education there, and take some basics and that kind of stuff. Fell in love, and then, of course, it wasn't love, but you know,
right.
and followed the girl to Austin, Texas, and which turned out to be a wonderful thing. I went to work for Case 101,
nice,
which was the
right.
media market station of the year in the CMAs at that time.
Right.
And then from that, I went to work for B93, which was a CHR station, and also the biggest one in town, and just had a blast. This is back in the days when they would hire limousines for you. They would have beer and pizza parties at the radio station.
Wow.
Not conducive to great work, and
Right. Yeah. Right.
to your best air work. But it was a lot of fun, and man, I just made great friends down there and enjoyed that. And at that time, Rick, I mean, the city of Austin was like 300,000, and now it's well over 1 million.
Yeah, wow.
So, yeah, it's really grown. But, yeah, just, great experiences all the way around.
Right. So then once you were finished there in Austin, is that when you made the jump back to Nashville?
This
area?
is when Billy Parker hired me and brought me to KVOO AM back then.
Right.
And I worked afternoon drive on AM 1170. Got moved to KVOO FM and worked 7 to midnight there. So this is like 89 is when I started at KVOO AM, and then I think it was 91 that I switched to the FM side.
Okay.
And was there until I moved to Nashville in October of 93.
93. Okay.
Yeah.
So take me to Nashville in 1993. We'll come back to KVOO.
Okay.
90s country was,
right.
You had the 80s country, and then you had 90s country. Right. And so it was starting to go to that newfangled country at that point,
right, right.
and there were so many new people out.
Right.
And still putting out pretty good music. I mean,
right.
as far as, country music.
Right.
Tell me what that atmosphere was like coming from the radio side of things,
right.
and more into the music business side of things.
Well, that transition kind of happened as an invitation. There was a show on the old Nashville Network called Be a Star.
Mm-hmm.
And the producer of that show, I had sent in my stuff, and he wrote me back, and he said, I noticed the material you sent in was original songs that you had written. And I said, yes, I did a session there in Tulsa. And he said, I tell you what I want you to do. He goes, I don't want you to be on Be a Star. He said, I want you to be on this new show that I've got called Country Today.
Oh.
And it was hosted by Rob Weller, who had been with Entertainment Tonight. And I was like I think I was the first musical guest on there. And I can remember Vince Gill's, at the time, wife, Janice, and her sister. They were sweethearts of the rodeo.
Yeah.
They did a cooking segment on that show. And, the funniest thing I can remember from that was being so used to radio and our tight segues. Television, you can't do that.
Right.
You know, when I hear the music fading, you know, I start talking, and they had to stop me. And I go, we have to do that again. Please don't do that again.
Yeah, please don't.
Yeah, please
do
wait.
That again.
So, I'm like, okay, gotcha,
Wow.
you know. So, but I had just a fun time, and that was, I ended up on that in March of 94. So, you know, I thought I was well on my way to being the next Elvis at that point. I mean, when, you know, from being in Tulsa in October to here I am, you know. But it you know, it was a very tough business, Rick, you know, as I'm not telling you any secrets. You've been down there, you know.
Yeah.
But I would suggest if anybody wants to do that, you've got to go down there and wrestle the bear. It's so hard to do that remotely. And that's one of the things my dad told me back then. He said, if you want to do this, you got to go down there. And he said, and I said, well, Dad, I'm ready. But gosh,
You thought you were ready.
Yeah, I got kicked in the head right off the bat.
Right.
You know? So, but a lot of cool things happened. I mean, I went to Poland, and a lot of just meeting wonderful people. And, you know, then that ended up, you know, to where I got a Dove Award in the bluegrass gospel industry. And that opened up a whole other wonderful thing, too.
On a side note, just so you're aware, Kristen is Janice's sister's name, Kristen Arnold. We met in Ada when they did a show at Ken Lance Sports Arena.
Oh, okay.
And I was kind of their babysitter for the weekend. And they were coming in for a rodeo, and they were going to do a show, and then they had a club there.
Right.
And she tried her best to get me to go on the road with her. That was one of my only real claims to fame.
Right.
And she's like, I really enjoy your company. You should come on the road with me.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't very long after that they announced, you know, Vince and they split, and you know, and that kind of thing, and they went their own way. But I thought that's kind of my only with Sweethearts of the Rodeo. That's my only.
Well, that's
touch
very
there. That's
cool,
weird.
man. Well, they were a lot of fun. I can remember that doing the show with them. They were just hilarious. Had great senses of humor. You know, were a blast to work with.
Yeah.
So,
Let's head back to KBOO real quick.
All right, okay.
We kind of jumped ahead there a little bit, but so at KBOO, when you were hired, were you hired by Billy?
Yes.
At that point, okay. So he was program director still then, or was he operations?
He was still program director, and I believe Mike Wilson was his music director.
Yeah. Now he went on to Curb Records, right?
He went to RCA first.
Right.
And he hired, and I think actually Mike was the one that had the dinner with me at the what's that? The Celebrity
Club there.
Celebrity Club.
Yeah.
Thank you,
31st in Yale.
That's where he hired me.
The old mob restaurant. That's what I always called it.
Yeah.
Now, in reality, it probably has no mob ties.
Right.
But it always felt that way because the inside had all the corner rounded booths.
Right.
The red velvet.
Right.
I mean, so, you know, you walk in and I fully expected always to see like crime bosses in the corner of that room.
Right.
You know, holding court and waiting for somebody, you know, the rival, you know, mob to come in and shoot up the place. Because that's what I always felt like when I was
like an episode of Wise Guy or
yes,
something.
Right,
yes.
Yeah. Sit down, have some food. You know. Now the thing is that I'm not even saying that. Please don't even take that.
Right.
I'm saying that there was any mob ties, but it just felt that way.
Yes. Very cool atmosphere.
Yeah.
If you want that
Like
experience.
you fully expected like Frank Sinatra to walk out of the kitchen. You know, everybody having a good time. You know, kind
or
of
Don
a thing.
Rickles to come out and razz you. You know?
Right. Yeah. To roast me right there.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. That's
okay.
right.
So.
But Mike Wilson, yes, he was the one, and basically, then Mike was gone like 30 days later. You know, like where'd he go? You know, and he was on the FM side. Back then, we were very separated. And I don't know if you remember any of that. That culture was still there, but man, it was, you know, if you were, you know, AM 1170 Big Country, that's where you were.
Right.
And if you were over here on the KVOO FM side, which back then it was, I think KCFO still, they hadn't switched the call letters yet. we were two different camps, and Mike Wilson was over in that camp, so I didn't see much of him. I answered directly to Billy, much to Billy's chagrin. Billy, God bless him, the wrestling matches that he had with me and Chuck Stevens are legendary, because we were snot-nosed kids and full of ourselves, and I don't know how he put up with us, So he was just like, he already had two boys at home, and here he had to raise us too, in the halls of that place.
Yeah. His whole philosophy was, great. I get rid of 2 yahoos, and here comes 2 more.
Oh, I know it. Yeah. With Chuck, I will never forget, because Chuck loved playing softball and was always in Skytook on teams and stuff like that. And I can remember Billy calling him one time and going, "Chuck, you need to put that bat and ball down and get your behind to work." Chuck and I always laugh about our Billy stories, because he just, and love him to death, because he did teach us so much, and it's all about just having common sense, Rick, in everything in life. And he's just one of those mentors that injected that, that from when you're around him. He's a common sense dude,
And, when I had interviewed Toby Scott, and then also had Eric Wayne on,
right,
and he said the same thing, and that is that and I'm sure the people probably that listen to the show on a consistent basis are probably going to get tired of hearing it, but it's the truth. He taught me, the biggest thing he taught me in life was to treat people like they're $1 million.
Right.
When you're talking to that person only,
right,
that's all you talk to.
Right.
You're not looking towards the next person you're looking at. You're not looking past them to try to see who else is in line to talk to you or whatever. That's your sole purpose, is to concentrate on those people. And that's still, even to this day, that advice has stuck with me.
Yeah.
I think of that every time. These folks that are coming up and talking to you or whatever are who put you there. And so, and that goes with the radio business, but then that also goes with just personal. I mean, listen to what they're saying.
Right.
Don't try to talk over them. Listen to what they're saying, and that's ultimately that's probably the biggest thing, that he did, and the fact that he was known so much more, in Nashville and things like that, and then you come back here, and on occasion people, who's Billy Parker, but you're like, what are you? What? I mean, it's just just weird to me to even think that. What are you talking about? I mean, he's Billy. I mean, it's Billy Parker.
Right.
So I love the man to death, and I can hear him. I can hear him making that call now to Chuck. Hoss, listen, you're going to have to get in here.
You put that bat and ball down. I'll never
I can
forget
hear
that. But Rick, I mean, I've known Billy since I was a little kid. Billy used to have a television show on KVOO television, which was Channel 2 back then.
Channel 2, yep.
And I remember it was sponsored by, I think, a furniture company and Blue Cross and Blue Shield, and Dad was a frequent guest on there. And I was just, enamored with Billy, insisted that my mom give me a Billy Parker haircut. So there are little old baby pictures of me, and I've got Billy's haircut from back then.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's no lie. I'm sure that was probably pretty popular. I mean, the thing is, if you look at some of those old pictures, boy, he's a good looking man too.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Now, speaking of that, I mean, and I'm sure your dad will be interested to know that I segued with good looking man, but he's a star.
Well, Dad,
your dad, Rodney Lay. Oh my goodness.
Rick, it's one of those things that Dad, and we always laugh about this because he always says, "Well, Rod, I was an almost star," and he'll tell you all his stories because they're very, very fascinating. But he's just one of those guys that has always had great favor on him. When you speak of terms of Christian favor, the man has had that all of his, and his power of retention amazes me. He knows stories and can keep them all, and jokes, he keeps them all, and people he remembers, and he just I don't know how God blessed him with all that. We always laugh about this. If I had his looks or he had my voice, it was one of those things where we always, when we're together, we just talk about stuff like that and laugh. But it was a blessing being raised by him. Very stern disciplinarian, but taught me that early on so I wouldn't be a goofball. One of the very first things that happened in my little old career was there was a restaurant named Egbert's, And Egbert's was around Coffeyville, Bartlesville, and this kind of thing. And they came to my dad and said, we want, a new jingle for the company. But we want to do this. We want you to write one, and the head of the company is going to write one, and then the board will choose the best. And he said, well, how about if my son also writes one? So I wrote one too, and they picked mine. And so, but anyway, so Dad was going into the studio to record this thing, and unbeknownst to me, he wants me to go play guitar on it. And I'm like, are you kidding? I'm like 16 years old at the time,
right?
Scared to death. But he corrected me and just would always say, you can do better. You can, all that. And it turned out nice, but those things never leave you. It's far as don't settle for good.
Yeah.
Settle for what you know is your best.
Right.
Then you can let go of it. If it's your best, you let go of it. And I've just taken that with everything that I've ever done in life, whether it's, mowing the yard or being a husband or whatever it is, being a friend,
right.
You owe that to yourself, because at the end of your days on this earth, you don't want to look back with regret, And,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
His advice of you've got to live it. You got to live,
right.
You got to be there and be a part of that,
right.
in Nashville and things like that. So when you made that move and you were on the TV show,
right.
So now you're out of radio at this point,
right.
And you're on the other side of the mic now.
Right.
What was your next path? I mean, I know that you're a very good songwriter.
Well, that was the main thing. Then I went into writing songs like from 10 a.m. until 1. And then you take a lunch break, and then you write 2 until 5. And I did that primarily. At night, then, I would go into a lot of studios, and I got hired to do vocals. And I could stack my own background vocals, so therefore I was cheap. You didn't have to hire extra people.
Right.
So I just would go in there and just ding, 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 and stack them up and leave, And that's kind of what kept me afloat, at that time. And then my ex-wife worked as well, so we just kind of did that as a team effort. And then, lo and behold, the songwriting thing did take off. That was a deal where I in the little town I lived in was Hendersonville, Tennessee. Met a gentleman there named Mike Richards, and Mike had a music store, a used music store in town. And we got to talking. And he's like, well, I know your dad. I've had some of his albums before. And he said, do you write? And I said, well, yeah, and da-da-da. So we sat down and decided to write. And the first 5 songs that we wrote got cut, and one of those was "He Still Looks Over Me," which was the Dove Award song. Then that opened a whole door to something that I never ever in my life saw coming, and that was being founding a bluegrass band with Mike called the Chigger Hill Boys and Terry. And gosh, Rick, I mean the most rewarding thing of all of that was as a songwriter, sometimes you'll get on Google. And you will Google your song to see if somebody has recorded this thing, and they're not paying you.
Right.
Because it's policing that stuff is.
That's a horrible side of the business.
It
honestly.
is.
It really should be so much better than it is.
Yeah, and but it's been that way. And but in that process, found a story, and this gentleman was in a quartet, a gospel quartet. He was driving home from a show that he had done. And there was another gentleman that was his neighbor, and they happened to be on the same country road heading home. Well, this older gentleman from the quartet had a wreck, went off the road. The guy behind him was a drummer in another band. He's the guy that pulls that man from the fire. The reporter asked the older gentleman, she said, well, what was going through your mind while he was pulling you from the fire? And he said, the words to my favorite song. He said, he sends angels to watch over my family. Sometimes I overlook him, but he still looks over me. And I was like, wow, that's what this is about. It's not about me and my stupid songwriter nonsense. It is about being a vessel for God.
Yeah.
And letting him use me and get these things out to where they bless people.
Wow.
And that's, right there, I was like, now I know what this is, you know. And it totally changed my life.
I've never heard that story before, Rod. We've been friends a long time, and I've never heard that.
It's just
that is amazing.
Well, I boohooed like a kid. I was like, golly, Lord.
I'm almost right now.
Well, I was just like, I just was like, and guilt washed over. I was like, I'm so sorry that I've never seen this. And now it's hit me in the face, and I'm like, man, I feel like a bum. I never knew that's what I'm here for. So Rick, that's what I'm here for, and those songs that song has been recorded now over 100 times.
Wow.
And it's just one of those things that it's in some hymnals in churches. I've seen videos on YouTube, and there's these ladies in a congregation, and they're singing it out of their hymnal. I'm like, my gosh, it took on a life that I never imagined.
Right.
Well, and I make sure I wrote this down because I posted this on Facebook. And this is one of those things that I didn't want to forget, because on the night of the Dove Awards, and I will tell you this, let me tell you about that song. It's a fascinating story. Mike Richards was working for Daywind, the gospel label.
Right.
Brought them this song, and the guy that was the head of publishing listened to it, and he said, well, Mike, that song will never get recorded because it is an admission of guilt. Because it's basically all about how everyone has sinned and fallen short.
Right.
That's the crux of the song. So the guy took the thing and threw it in a box and there was 100 other tapes in the box.
Yeah.
Then he got replaced by a guy named Marty Funderburk. Marty Funderburk goes through that box and finds that song and goes to Mike and said, I think that's a monster hit, and I want to cut that on the Lewis family. And they were, a stalwarts of the industry. And they recorded that. It ended up being the biggest song of their career. And we got the word. It got nominated for a Dove Award, and it was like in the top 50. So we were like, well, that's cool. We're excited. Then it made the top 20. Then it made the top 10, and then it got in the top 5. And we're like, well, we've got to go. So we went and got, new clothes and blah, 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 and went down there. And I'll remember sitting, next to my wife at the time, and they're announcing our names. And I had the little program from the show in my lap, and she took that program from me, and she said, call your name. Boom, there it was. I was like, oh, my gosh. So I'm not sitting next to Mike Richards, my co-writer, but we met each other in the aisle going up there. And he yells, can you freaking believe this? And I'm like, oh, Mike, hold on.
Oh, hold on.
And he's like, Rodney, we're goofballs. How did this happen? And it just was surreal, It just was something that, because, we beat Allison Krauss, Doyle Lawson, Ricky Skaggs. I'm like, how in the, it was David and Goliath's story, Again, it was just God. There's no other explanation for it, Totally God, and it's just, you get out of the way and let him do his thing, and he'll do things that you can't imagine,
we always think we have it under control, but if you step away and let, it was God breathed, and that was the thing.
It.
And that, I think that also is probably the difference with when he took over, and he listened to it with different ears, and so he knew it was a hit, and that's also, I think, part of that. The whole goofballs thing. You feel like you're a goofball. But God's using you in ways that you never thought that you would be used. That way.
Had no idea. I went down there to be the next Elvis.
Right.
Didn't happen.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Right. Right.
I like I said, I live with no regret about it, because I went down there, I rang the bell. And I think maybe in my going back to my dad's advice, that was the most important thing, was I didn't want to be a guy in a rest home going, man, if I had only
went to Nashville, or if I'd only given it a try. Just play, my guitar in Kansas my whole life, or whatever. If you have that dream, if you're listening and you think you're the next star, you've been told you're the next star.
Right.
By all means, go for it. But you have to be all in.
Right.
You cannot be halfway. Well, I'll try it. No, you have to be in there, because you're constantly having to sell yourself. Right. You're constantly having to talk yourself up.
Right.
And that's kind of where that ego thing comes from.
Right.
I know that even in radio, I was not always the best on-air personality, but I did win 2 day parts consistently.
There you go.
And so, and it was just because whatever was said, or my attitude, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was advice from Billy, but I recognized early on that he had the experience and and that to be giving advice, you better listen to that advice. Right. I didn't have my dad around.
Right.
My dad came late to the party with that. We didn't really get along very well towards the end of his life. We did, and he moved back. And that was one of the things that was funny, was that when I went to visit him, the nurses had said, well, he's really had a bad day. And I was like, oh, what do you mean? Has it been real bad? Has he been unconscious? No, but he's been laughing to himself all day, and it's kind of weird. And just so you're aware, when they get to the end of the life, that happens. And so, honestly, what it was he had listened to my show, and he had never been in the Tulsa area to listen to me on the radio.
Oh, wow.
And I had Reba McEntire on.
Yeah.
And was doing a phone interview with her, and he thought it was so funny because we ended it. My name on the air was Big Daddy Stevens, and so I said, well, I love you, Reba, and I said, I remember thinking myself off air, oh my gosh, I just said I love you to Reba McEntire, and then, but for her to respond back, I love you too, Big Daddy.
Yeah.
That tickled him because number one, next to Jeannie C. Riley, that was his gal.
Yeah.
And so he just thought that was the funniest thing. And I remember he never cursed in his life, but he did that day. And that was you were one funny son of a gun. Hey, when we come back, we will dive into the personal life of Rodney Lay Jr. Plus, we'll talk about the time he and I wrote a song together. And hang on, because Rodney is going to step up on the Behind the Mic stage and sing his hit song he wrote with Mike Richards, He Still Looks Over Me. All this and more when we return. You're listening to the Behind the Mic with Rick Hampton podcast.
I'm Mo.
And I'm Sheila Jo. And we're Mojo Merchandise. Mojo Merchandise was created by two friends with a craft passion.
We love to make things as gifts, like baby shower presents, wedding shower presents, party decorations, and balloon bouquets.
There is nothing we can't do once we put our mind to it.
We specialize in vinyl printed t-shirts,
home decor signs, pillowcases, cups, and much more.
If you have a favorite scripture or a mom saying you want on a t-shirt or sign, we've got you covered.
If you have an idea or needing a gift, let Mojo Merchandise make exactly what you need.
Hey, I want to thank Mojo Merchandise for sponsoring Behind the Mic podcast. And they've come up with a great design for a lot of organizations, and they could do the same for you as well. You can find them on Facebook. Just look up Mojo Merchandise, and we've partnered to give you an opportunity to actually win something. I'm going to give you a chance to win a $20 gift certificate. All you have to do is email me at btmrickhampton@gmail.com. That's btmrickhampton@gmail.com. Or go to the Behind the Mic with Rick Hampton Facebook page and click on the Send Message button. Be sure to include your name, city you live in, and best way to contact you. Then all the work is done. All you have to do is listen to Behind the Mic, and you could be a big winner.
You're listening to Behind the Mic with Rick Hampton.
We're back talking with my special guest, Rodney Lay Jr., and before the break, we told a few stories about radio and music industry, but there is a personal side to you, Rod, and I've always thought you were an extremely talented individual. I think you have a great singing voice, and I do think you have a great talent for songwriting.
Thank you, Rick.
And then, but more importantly than that, you have taken that. I can see your parents' influence in your life.
Right.
I can see Billy's influence in your life,
Right.
because for you, it is about people.
Right.
You genuinely care for people.
Right.
I mean, we all have those people that we're like, you see them coming down the hall, and you think that, but
Jesus
you know what?
had those people too.
Exactly.
Remember? He said,
That's right.
Guys, I got to pull away.
Yeah.
You remember?
Hey, listen, I got to deal with the Pharisees.
Yeah,
really? I mean,
yeah.
so
I need time to myself.
right. And so, he only went to the mountain.
Right.
But for you, I think that's one of the things, when I first met you, that was probably one of the things that I noticed right away was your genuine care for people. And listening and listening to them, I went through that time period.
Right.
I was married before, and
Right.
Matter of fact, I mean, you and I'm going to just tell the quick story of that. Is we wrote a song together.
We did, yeah.
It didn't go anywhere, but honestly, that falls back to that whole thing of God.
It does.
God was trying to heal my heart,
Right.
And He was trying to speak life into me. I had
Right.
gotten out of church, and I
Right.
really wasn't going to church anymore, and things
Right.
like that. And I was only going for the motions of it. And so I remember when I talked to you, you were like, "Well, how you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, it's been tough. She, left, and we're, getting
Right.
divorced, and the circumstances behind that were just crazy." But
Right.
I said, "Yeah, I'm doing all right." And
Right.
you're like, "Well, that's good, And we'd kind of been hanging out and talking a little bit in the studio, and I remember. And you were like, "Well, how are you coping with it?" And I said, "Well, I'm just kind of purging the house of, anything that maybe was left behind."
Right.
And I said, "Honestly, I've just got this little box over here, and And, if I find anything, I just throw it in that little box. You never once said, dude, is that really healthy? I mean, are you doing, is that really right? Should you be doing that? I mean, to me, it's time to just pick up and move on.
Right.
But you never said that. Right. And but you did say, well, can I ask you a question? I said, sure. And I was about to walk out the door, and you said, when are you going to know when's enough's enough? Are you going to just forever put stuff in this box or what?
Right.
And I said, you know what, Rodney, I don't know. And I remember I kind of got a little agitated at you because I was like, I want to wallow in this self-pity for a while, and you're trying to pull me out of this.
Right.
And, I recognize that. Yeah. But as I walked out the door, I kind of just flippantly said, I don't know, when the box is full, I guess. And then I left.
Yeah.
And I remember I got about 2 steps into the newsroom, which was right behind that studio where you were at.
Yeah.
And I come walking back down that little short hallway, and I opened up the door, and you were like, it's all right. I'll meet you at your house. I've got my guitar. I'll bring my recorder. Yeah. We're writing a song tonight.
Yeah. Well, it was. It was like,
and that was really it. I mean, it was like, oh my gosh. And that's kind of the title of the song was When the Box is Full.
Right.
I sit all alone looking at our life, trying to make pieces fit, going through things that you've left behind, knowing that this is it. Finally let go of holding on, living.
Well, there's a little piece of it right there. When the Box is Full was taken from a demo recording in my living room in about 2007. It was never meant to be a blockbuster song, never was ever actually released to any country music artist, and it was never number 1 on the chart. It was more of a therapy song, so it didn't really do anything.
I will say this, here to attest, that is a fantastic song. It is for a specific purpose, which is, like you said, it's a healing process, and I'm sure it's not only for men. It's I'm sure women have done the same thing of putting somebody's belongings in a box to the place where, okay, that's the last thing I'm sticking in there, and then they can come get this, or what? I'm setting this outside the door, and I'm done.
For me, that was one of those things where number one, it did not only did it do something for me because it kind of got me agitated,
right?
Which a lot of times, music wise, it either touches you one of several ways, and that is, either makes you angry,
right,
and then you want to, how can I write this? Number 2, it puts you in that love, mood. A lot of songs do.
Sure.
But this one for me was truly the healing thing. It took it to, you know what? You're right. When is enough?
Right.
And when will I pick up and move on?
Right.
Honestly, that's what that song was for me.
Right.
And so I counted it a privilege to write it with you, just because number one, I had never been through that process.
Right.
You were a songwriter, so you've been through that process where you guys sit down together, like if you have a co-writer and you guys work on something and hammer it out.
Right.
And I think we wrote it in like 20 minutes. I mean,
pretty close,
and then you were like, well, hey, I think we're there. Let's cut this thing and do a raw cut on it.
Yeah.
It gave me a peek inside
right.
the music business and stuff like that, because we get caught up in that. But songs, for me, and I know that that's the way it is with you too, because we've had several discussions even since about songs like that, but how much they come in contact with you and how much they touch you.
Right.
And I think that's, I have a piece of artwork that's at home that says, music is the language the whole world understands.
Right.
And it doesn't matter what it is. Mm-hmm. If it touches you, it touches you.
Right.
And, it could be in a bad way. It could be in a good way. But most of the time, I can tell you, and a song comes on the radio, I can tell you pretty much where I was at the first time I heard that song.
Sure.
So, and I know that you're the same way. I mean, music plays such a huge part of your life. So when you came back, when we first met at KBOO, you had been in Nashville. You had some of the success, songwriting and things like that. So when you came back to Oklahoma in this area, by that time, the person you were married to then, you guys had separated and went your separate ways and things like that. And so then you came back to KBOO, and that's kind of where I first met you at.
Right.
After having all of this experience behind you.
Right.
So coming back to radio, better for you the second time around, or which side did you like the best? Did you like the radio side or the music side?
To be honest with you, they're two totally different things, Both are very creative. In radio, that's one of the things I do miss is you don't have, outside of morning shows, you don't have a lot of creativity like when you and I were kids. Man, the whole everyday part of a radio station was happening. You had Morning Drive, of course, doing its thing, and the middays. The midday guy or girl was always very much of a companion, a very friendly, soothing voice with you at your lunchtime. The afternoon guy or girl was the other, like almost the zany morning kind of thing was going on there. And then your 7 to midnight person, they had the kids that were calling in requesting songs, and you were cutting and splicing and had contests, and it was busy. It was a lot of fun to listen to, and that's one thing that I do miss about radio, and it had changed. Yeah, I can remember when I got back in one of my first days on the air at Big Country, and the phones weren't active. Yeah. And they used to ring all the time. Yeah. And so I called Chuck Stevens. Chuck was over at Mix 96 at the time. I said, Chuck, am I doing something wrong? He said, Rodney, no. He said, the thing that's happened is a lot of people think that you are what they call voice tracked, where you went in and recorded the show, but you're not physically there. He said, the only time they know that you're there is when you have a contest. He said, then your phones will be active. He said, but otherwise they don't bother anymore. Yeah. I'm like, man, I just hate that went away.
I do too, because, for the longest time, they started out disc jockeys. That's where DJ came from. Sure. And then they slowly started developing to on-air personalities. Right. Because that was the truth. They had a personality, and the station wanted you to have that personality. Absolutely. The reason they hired you was because you're zany, or you're funny, or you're a great storyteller, or you have great facts. You do your show prep, as they call it. And you would go out and find little tidbits of information about this artist or whatever, because that's, ultimately that is, that's who I wanted to be too. I wanted to do that. When I was on middays, I loved it. I loved.
That's what Billy told you. Remember, that he set you down and go, Hoss, you got to talk to them like they're across the fence. Yeah. And that's it. If you have that connection, people will stay with you.
Yeah, and they did. It was funny because I remember. I also loved going out, to be honest with you, the funny thing is that a lot of radio personalities, everybody assumes, they're the life of the party, they're always zany, they're always joking and everything else. Right. But in reality, you know what? You're on stage, really, when you're doing that kind of thing. Right. And so when you don't have to be on stage, you just want to blend into the background. Right. And I know a lot of on-air guys that are like that, and gals that are like that, who, if they go to a party, they just want to sit in the background. They don't want to talk. They don't want to be, and there's always that one person, hey, come up here and tell us a funny joke. Tell us something funny. Right. But for the most part, they don't do that. They love to blend into the background. And that's kind of the way I was too, growing up even. I will get up and tell a story if I'm asked, because it's just what I did. You know what I mean? And you get to that point where you feel like you're always on stage. And I know that a lot of the times that's probably the thing I loved the most, was the on-air creativity part of it. Right. And being able to have that ability. I'm glad that I was in at least part of those days. Right. Being able to do that, because that's what I love. I love connecting with the audience. I love talking to the audience. I love working the phones. Sure. I loved doing that kind of stuff. But then I also loved being out in public. Right. Getting, using that advice that Billy had given me. Sure, absolutely. Ago, because that was probably my best part. I told a story. I'd been out of radio. It was 2007, because I got out in 2007, but I remember going to a show at the Ford Center, and it was still the Ford Center before they changed it to Chesapeake. I remember going to the show. I'd been off the air. Well, by that time, because I was doing program director, I had been off the air for probably a year. Every once in a while, if somebody was on vacation, I would step in and do the show, but I did it the same way. I tracked it. I just recorded it, so I'd be free during the day to do other things. And so, nobody could talk to me. Nobody could, call me on the phone unless we were doing a contest. And so I remember I was walking along the concourse in Oklahoma City there at the Ford Center. By this point, not only was I off the air, but I was actually out of radio. But I was walking along, didn't have any kind of Big Daddy shirts, which I wore all the time back then, because it was my name, and I was endorsed by Big Daddy Clothing. And so I heard my name. Right. Hey, Big Daddy. you know, and I turned around and it was a listener from Tulsa.
Wow.
And I just turned around and they were like, man, I haven't seen you in forever. And they gave me a big old hug like we were family. And in reality, we were.
Right.
I mean, those people became family to me.
Sure.
And vice versa. You know, I mean, I was in their house. They invited me into their car, their
That's
house,
right.
or wherever.
Yep.
And so that's the connection and that's the tie. And that's
Right.
ultimately, that's what I thought, man, you know what? Here I am feeling sorry for myself. Oh, I'm not in radio anymore, and I loved it, and I wished I'd be back, and I wish somebody would recognize me, and, you know, whatever. And then it happens, you know, and then it's that God wink of, you know what, I'm going to put this guy here. But it was really cool because, you know, I got to talk to him, and I used to talk to him on the request line all the time, you know, and so I knew him by sight too, and that was the thing, you know.
Right.
So to me, that was probably, for radio-wise, that was probably my favorite memory was listeners.
Sure.
You know, we always had the crazy listeners, you know, the ones that were nuts or whatever, you know, like, you know, the listener appreciation shows and things like that and different things, and KVOO family picnic. And there was always at least one family that had like possum stew in a trash can, you know, and and they'd always want you to sit down with them and eat. And, you know, for me, I'd always have to, I'm full. I just had a little bite, but, you know, I'll sit and talk with you if you like, but, you know, I'm not eating anything out of a trash can. Sorry. But, you know, those were probably some of my favorite memories, you know, the stories like that. If you could just list one, and it doesn't have to be with KVOO, any of your radio career, what's your favorite listener story?
Rick, I'd have to go back almost to KIND because I was so involved in the community. It was a smaller town, and you know, because you knew that your first radio was that way too. They used to have this thing. It was every year they have Niwala, which is Halloween backwards, and it's a big celebration up there. And they have like these races where they get in bed racks and push each other down the street.
Oh, right.
Well, there is a whole group of strange folks I didn't know, you know, and they said, well, hop on our bed, Rodney. And I hopped on there and went down this thing. And, man, we crashed into parking meters and all sorts of stuff. And I just had the time of my life doing that kind of thing. So, if anything, it's like you said, it's being just out there and doing stuff with folks that's just zany, you know. And I love that kind of thing.
Have you had any bloopers or radio fails you could tell us about?
One that stands out is I'll go back to B93, which is a station that no longer exists, so I can say terrible things.
Now, B93, now that was
in Austin.
Shades?
Yeah, that was Shade Stevens on Austin's hottest hits, B93. And I talk like that, you know.
Yep.
So...
And they encouraged that.
Oh, it had to.
Yeah.
And it was just, you know, bang, 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 bang.
Which I try to give a little inside information. That's called puking in the business, by the way, because that's what it sounds like.
Right.
You're really trying to talk about it. Yeah.
And we had to read liner cards, which is just your average when people listen to radio. And you go, why do they keep saying the same thing over and over and over like once an hour? That's called a liner card. Right. And they have to read that.
Yep.
So it was that kind of thing. But going back to them, I told you that they provided us limo service. And I can remember I was hosting this artist at a club. And it was a girl named Brenda K. Starr.
Okay, yep, I know the name.
She had like one hit.
Right.
But one of her background singers was Mariah Carey.
Wow.
So I remember meeting her when she was a little kid, basically. But then at this club, of course, you know, I'm ashamed to say this, but I touched a few things that weren't water.
Uh-huh. You know? Yes.
That had a little power in
Adult beverage.
Adult beverages.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. And had to go back, and at that time I was working overnight, midnight to 5:30. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, I passed out. I had went to our GM's office because she kept the door open and she had a big cushy chair. And I'm like, man, I'm tired. I know if I just sat in this chair, I'll be all right. I sat down in that chair and just passed out. And I was out for 10 minutes.
Oh, my goodness.
10 minutes of dead air, and nobody caught it.
Oh,
Thank God, because our morning man, he was married to the program director, and he gets up at 3:30. So this happened between 3 and 3:10.
Oh, my goodness.
But I would just think, okay. That can never happen again.
Right.
That's the most unprofessional thing in the world. But again, when you're in your early 20s and you're stupid, you do things that you just go, how on earth did I live?
Yeah, because dead air is like the enemy when you're on the radio. You know, I even still to this day driving down the road, if something happens to a piece of equipment or something that I don't know about, I'm looking at the radio going, hello, come on, hello. You know, what's going on? Mine, it was actually when I worked in Ada, at K80A in Ada, Oklahoma. Small town, they have trading posts. post, kind of a tradio thing where people in that market, in that city or whatever, could call in. They had a couple of things, items to sell, and then to give you a phone number, and then you pass that on. Ours was cut into 3 segments, 5-minute pieces, and so it was from 6 to 6:15. So we would do 5 minutes and then take a break, play the sponsor ad, 5 minutes, take a break, and then we'd end it up. For some reason, every time I would get to that first segment break, I would always say it the same way. So you always wrap it up, you would say, okay, well, that's the last call we're going to take. We're going to take a break. When we come back, with more of your phone calls that, and then give the number, for them to call in or whatever. Well, I had this crutch phrase that I fell back on. My phrase, and I got to be careful even to say it now, but my phrase was always, well, that'll do it for the first part of Trading Post. We'll be back with more calls after this word from a Courtney Corner Drug or whatever. And I'd play the ad, and then you come back. Inevitably, I would always transpose 2 of those letters. And so it always came out, that'll do it for the first fart of Trading Post. Every time. Rodney, it got to the point where I had to actually write a card and set it in front of me. And I did that show for, I don't know how long, a long time, months and months and months. I hosted that show. And I still would catch myself, well, that'll do it for the first fart of, And I remember my program director, Rick Cody, called one and he goes, did you just say pursed fart? What is a pursed fart? Can you tell me what that is?
Yes.
No, Cody, I can't tell you what it is, but I appreciate you calling me on the hotline and calling me out on it, because there was actually a listener or two on occasion that would actually say that, I was listening to you last night and, love you got to be careful of those pursed farts. I'm like, oh my gosh.
And those small stations like that, one of the things that I'm sure you guys did was reading obituaries.
Yes.
And one of my parting gifts to the gentleman that owned KIND, which was Mr. Rupard, J. Nelson Rupard. He looked a lot like the little man from the cartoon Up, that movie. Okay, looked just kind of like that guy. One of the nicest men in the world. He trained Bill Curtis. Bill Curtis had worked there as a young man. So, and Bill kind of sounds like Nelson. Nelson, in the noon hour news time, he would read the obituaries. He had this piece on piano called Liebestrom, written by Chopin, real beautiful piano piece. But oddly enough, Spike Jones, the guy that did all those comedy records in the 40s, did a comedy version of that, which also starts out beautiful piano, then goes into this, wild crunch, crack, crack. And I can remember to this day, because one time I had to, cover for Nelson. Well, I guess on occasion I had to cover for Nelson on that. And the intro under this piano, over this piano music was, the Individual Mausoleum Company of Parsons presents now Requiem, a pause in the day's activities to pay tribute to memories of loved ones passed on. Then you would read Elsie Johnson of Elk City, all that not. So anyway, so I'm driving around and I hear Nelson, and I have done this, and he's up to like the third person, Betty Sue Schwigert, 75, crunch, correct, boom, he's just, oh my God, man, and and his carts all fall over, and his carts stacked, and he's trying to make noise. I just, God bless him, rest his soul. I know he hates me for that, but I, had to come clean that I did that to my former owner. So
there was times when you wish that the listeners could see behind the scenes.
Oh yeah,
and when I first started in Ada, even the things that you saw on like WKRP, which is one of the reasons why I went into radio.
Me too, yep.
But they were pretty accurate. I mean, as far as, you could point around the radio station and go, oh yeah, that's Herb Tarlake. Oh yeah, that's Johnny Fever. That's, but I remember there was so much funny stuff that happened out of that. And I don't know who it is. I mean, you might, but I think it was at K107. One of the, you talked about carts, and what most people don't know, carts are what you put commercials and stuff on. Nowadays, it's on computer and it's all digitized and everything else. But before, it was, you played them on carts, and they look like a little 8-track. I mean, like an 8-track tape is what they kind of look like. And so you would put all of the elements, things you heard between the songs, everything on there. And then ultimately, we were putting songs on the carts too, but they also act like tape does. And for those of you who don't know what tape is, Google it. Because I'm fortunate, and I love growing up in that time area of cutting tape and splicing stuff together and everything else. One of the things, though, that if you know anything about that, it's called degaussing, which means when you put the tape on a magnet, a very high-powered magnet, it erases that information.
Yep.
changes the structure of the tape, and it gets rid of that. That's how we would, we had bulk erasers in the studios, and when we got ready to record something on a cartridge tape like that, we would run it over that eraser, erase whatever was on it before, record over it. And I remember the story, and I don't know who it is. So if you listen to this and you either worked there or you knew who it was, or maybe you were the person, they had walls and walls of those, and they took an extension cord and plugged that handheld bulk eraser in, and just went down the spine of half of the carts on the wall when they were about to leave, like resign from the station. That's one of those that I always heard. That instance was another reason why when it was time for you to go, and a station said, "Hey, when you're done with your show, would you come by the office?
Yes,
I need to talk to you for a second."
Yes,
right?
Yeah.
I just needed to chat with you a minute.
Yeah.
You knew that was it.
Right.
But it was always they got to the point where they didn't even really do that. Then it was just always, "Hey man, you got a minute?"
Yeah.
After you've done your show.
Right.
Because of stuff like that happening,
Right.
of dumping things, and they would just destroy stuff. So of all of your days in the music business or radio,
right,
what is one story that sticks out that's a good one?
Going back to the Sugar Hill Boys and Terry, and going out and playing at churches and things like that. We primarily played around Nashville, around about a 200 or 300 mile radius, and a lot of that is in Kentucky, and there are real small little towns there that you don't want to be there after dark,
right.
And I can remember one of the towns we played in, the church said, "We're going to send somebody. As you're coming into town, there's a convenience store. We want you to go there and park there, and then if you can, there's a payphone. This is before cell phones.
Right.
Call us, and we'll come get you." And because they wanted to escort us through town to get over there, so because they were way up in the hills where they didn't see a lot of people. And I can remember going there and singing, all of those people knowing our songs and singing along with us, which was a wild thing,
Right.
And then afterwards, they had made a homemade lunch and stuff, which was fried chicken cooked in cast iron skillets, and it was like revisiting my great grandmothers and grandmothers who made that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It was delicious, that kind of thing, And then of course when we were done, they escorted us back out of town.
Right. Wow.
We're going to help you out of here. Just that kind of thing. Also, one of the places that I recorded when I was going to Poland, there was a gentleman there named Krzysztof, and his actual name in Polish is Zdzisław Krawczyk, and he is like the Elvis of Poland.
Wow.
Somehow or other, through Dad or something, I met the producer of this project, and he asked me to come help him, and I ended up co-producing this thing. One of the places we worked was with Willie Mitchell at Royal Recording in Memphis. That is the place where Al Green recorded all of his stuff.
Wow.
Let's Stay Together, all that stuff was cut there. And I met Reverend Green because he and Willie were still very, very close. And Rick, it was the phenomenal experience because I sang background vocals on this thing too, and I'm the only white guy there. And brother, I learned how to sing from the soul by hanging out with them. They taught me things I had no idea of. I'd heard stories of doing scales and things that they do in black music and black gospel especially that you're not really exposed to when you're a country boy from southeast Kansas. Just phenomenal experience. Going to Poland and singing over there for those people with Krzysztof. I was part of this television show, this big tribute to Krzysztof. And I'm one of the guests. I'm the guest American country singer.
Wow.
Over there. And I can remember he did a polka song, and I danced with him on stage, jumping up. And I had severe jet lag, and I was out of my mind, worn out. And I go back and watch that video today, and I just laugh because I'm a total, goofball on the thing, But just experiences like that I just, I met one of my dear friends is Paul Martin, who he was the lead singer of Exile for a while,
right.
And then worked with Marty Stewart. One of the things I did for them was I did the intro for Marty's show, like it was recorded, and ladies and gentlemen, and I did that for him, I did that for Roy, and I did that, I think, for Mel or somebody else, Mel Tillis, in years past. Just oddball stuff. LaToya Jackson recorded some of my songs, Michael Jackson's sister.
That. Yeah.
My big hit, if you want to call it that, in country was a Lee Greenwood song that he ended up cutting. So I just had such a vast array of weirdness in my life that it's just I can't put a finger on, when they say, well, what did you do?
Yeah.
Everything.
Everything. Right.
Whatever I hit the ball, if it came across the plate, I'm gonna take a swing at it,
Right.
So
wow.
But that's just kind of the stuff that I remember. As a kid, my first job was working at Lay's feed store, and I worked there for 5 years. I was age 10 until about 15 or so. Then I worked for Butcher's grocery store. Then I went to work for TG&Y. Then TG&Y had a terrible thing. They laid people off, and I was one of 40 people that got laid off in Coffeyville. And I went to work. My buddy was working for USD 445, the school district, as a janitor, and he got me a job there. So, and I can remember being all bummed out that here I am, a year after I graduated high school, I'm now mopping the halls. And Roy Clark called me. He said, "Rod, your dad told me you're down." He said, "Let me tell you something. One of the first jobs I had in high school was mopping the floor of a church." He said, "It leads to bigger and better things. So don't forget that." And I'm like, okay, man. I appreciated him taking the time to do that. Because he's a busy guy. One of Dad's funny stories dealing with that, because Dad was on Hee Haw for all those years, and one of his buddies was Grandpa Jones. And Roy was scheduled to be on the Opry one night, and Grandpa Jones was there, and Dad was backstage talking to Grandpa. This was the first Opry appearance of Billy Ray Cyrus. Billy Ray Cyrus is on stage singing "Achy Breaky Heart" with his big mullet and hunching around like he, awkward Elvis stuff. Grandpa Jones, without hesitation, just looks up at Dad and he goes, "Well, Rodney, I liked Acuff's version better."
I can always count on you for a story, because you always had some great artist stories and things like that, either through your dad or through your own experiences.
Right.
And I posted recently, I don't know what made me think of it, but I was sitting in the car, I was getting out, going into work one day, and Coward of the County was on by Kenny Rogers.
Yes.
And they get to the line in the song where it talks about, through the whole song, he's the coward of the county, and he's really a milquetoast kind of guy, and he does not get upset. And when he does get upset, he just takes it because his dad said, don't be like me and do that kind of thing. And so I remember through the whole song, and then there's the line where they talk about the girl that he's interested in, that he's in love with. She gets taken advantage of by a group of guys.
Right.
And so he finds out about it.
Right.
He comes into the bar, and to set the stage, he comes into the bar. They start giving him crap. And so he turns to walk away, and they all assume, oh, here he is again. Oh, he's the coward. Look at him running, going through.
Right.
And he stops and locks the door. And the line is, you could have heard a pin drop when Tommy stopped and locked the door.
Right.
For some reason, I don't know why, but it just hit me of, what was going through their mind at that point? Oh, crap. Okay, our reign is over. What is, what's going on? But more importantly, how would you like to been in the saloon at that point?
Sure,
fly on
the wall.
To see this. Oh man, he's had enough. So for me, that was funny.
Right.
And then I remember you jumped on and you told a story, and I was like, oh well, you got to tell this story. So take that from that. So you have an actual kind of a backstory about that song.
Well, that song, those brothers you describe were given the name by the songwriters, the Gatlin Boys. Now, at the time, Larry Gatlin and the Gatlin brothers were a huge, huge country act.
Yeah.
Simultaneous with Kenny Rogers' career. Larry Gatlin was on Roy's plane. It was on Roy Clark's plane, and Dad is up front with Roy.
Now, the tie there, some people may not get that tie, though.
Right.
Roy Clark, your dad, was his band leader, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And traveled with Roy primarily. Like if they flew, he was with him. So, and Dad can correct me if I'm wrong on this, because I'm sure you'll have him as a guest.
Yeah.
But from what I recall, then the story was that Dad was sitting up front with Roy, and Dad was looking the other way out the window at something. And when he turned back around to the left, there was a bare set of rump cheeks right there, belonging to Larry Campbell, who just looked at it. Dad said, "Hey, Rodney, how's it going?" But anyway, that song was out at that time, and of course they're joking around and talking, and Dad brings that up, and he goes, "Well, what do you think about that being named after you all, the Gatlin Boys?" And Larry was upset about it. I think they probably did it as a joke, thinking it was funny. He said, but forever. He goes, that's not just an album cut that went away. He said, that's one of this man's career songs. Right. And he goes, it'll be on forever. And he goes, forever, we're the Gatlin Boys. And he was not happy about that. So,
I remember that.
Yeah, that was a story.
So any other stories like that that you know of that you talked to me? I mean, I know we'll talk to your dad a little bit about that, because I would love for him to be on because the thing that he's been experiencing and seeing, I know, are deep. I mean, he's got a lot of deep cuts, if you will.
Yes, he does.
I mean, he does.
He does. Rick, the things I can think of, unfortunately, my brain is not what it used to be. When I came back here, right before I came back, I had a brain illness,
right,
and about bit the dust twice in 2005. From that, I have things that will jar my memory and go, oh yeah, I remember that. And then other stuff, like seeing your story about the song, it plugs it in. So unfortunately, I'm one of those guys that if I haven't written the thing down, I will not remember snot.
Right.
And I don't know why, but it comes back time and time again. And all I would just say, people watch my Facebook page or something, and I'll have them on there.
Right.
Wow. From time to time. But yeah, I just had so many of them. And like I said, one of them though that was dear to my heart, and I wrote this down, was Roy used to have a thing called the Celebrity Star Night, and it was a big thing here in Tulsa. And when I was very, very young, after school, Channel 8 would always show Gilligan's Island about 4:30. So my little brother and I would watch that. And at one of the celebrity golf tournaments, Alan Hale Jr., the skipper, was there along with, I think, every other cast member but Tina Louise did not show, but the rest of them were all there. Meeting him, I walked up to him and I, told him about, my little brother watch you every day and da-da-da-da. And he took his hand and he messed up my hair and called me little buddy. Well, man, it was like being touched by the Pope,
Right, exactly, sure.
And I will never forget then trying to go back to school at Deering School in Deering, Kansas on Monday and tell him I'd met the skipper. They're all like, yeah, sure.
Sure you did. Yeah, sure you
but
did.
He was just such a kind man, because there were a bunch of us little kids that were the children of these other, like Mel Tillis' bunch, and we're all there. And he was the skipper, Yeah. So it was just so cool, I met Sam Drunker that day from was it Petticoat Junction? Okay,
yeah.
And a bunch of those guys from those shows would be on, because Roy had worked with a bunch of them, like in the Beverly Hillbillies. He was cousin Roy Halsey, so I met Donna Douglas and a bunch of those too. So, and Granny. They were all nice people. All those people were they were very, very kind to the public. And that's one thing that struck me, was as big as they were on national television. You got to remember, like Hee Haw itself had 36 million viewers per week, and they shout up and down when like American Idol scores of 4 million or 6 million. Right. This was way bigger than that.
Yeah.
And, at that time, look at our population, how many people, the percentage of the population knew these people.
Right.
And then how kind they were. That's what just struck me, was even as a kid, I'm like, I know what it's like to be bothered by people, and these people never saw it that way. And that they were tired. They were like Jesus in the Bible. They wanted to go crawl away, but they never did that. And they weren't ever short with people. They were kind.
Yeah.
My old boss at Case 101, Mike Carta, and I will never forget this. You're always so kind to everybody on the staff. He said, Rodney, at any moment, he said, you could be my boss. He goes, that's why you're nice to everybody going up and going down.
Yeah.
You got to keep that in mind.
Absolutely. That is a great piece of advice. The world would be a better place if we would just be nice. Well, coming up, I am going to be putting Rodney Lay Jr. through the Behind the Mic speed round of questions. Those burning answers that we want to know. We'll put 60 seconds on the clock and put him in the hot seat. That's all up next. Plus, he's going to be performing He Still Looks Over Me live on the Behind the Mic stage. It's all headed your way. And if you love what we're doing here with Behind the Mic and you want to hear more of that, the best way to follow us is 2 ways. You can go online to Facebook and like our Facebook page. Just search Behind the Mic with Rick Hampton. You can find all the information there. Like us. You can also follow us on Twitter. Or if you would like and you get your podcast from iTunes and subscribe, you can rate and review, and I would love it if you would do that. If you would leave me a review, if you love the show and you love what you hear on Behind the Mic with Rick Hampton, please leave me a rated review. I would love it. All right, here we go.
Behind the Mic speed round.
All right, Rod, you've been in radio. You know how this game works. We're going to put 60 seconds on the clock. I'll ask you a series of questions. You give me your quickest answer. Add those 60 seconds. Time begins after I ask the first question. What's your favorite place to live?
Hawaii for a week.
Nice. Is Bigfoot real?
Yes. Okay. He's the Noxie monster, actually.
All right, great. If you had a superpower, what would it be?
To make people laugh.
Laugh man.
Laugh man.
Okay, all right, good. What's your favorite food?
Mexican.
Do you like any of the new country out?
No.
Yeah. Yeah. Texting or talking?
I prefer talking, but I know the world in which we live, you're going to get a text first.
Ask permission or beg for forgiveness?
Both.
What's your biggest phobia?
Odd smells. When I can't identify what I'm smelling. Yes.
Okay. Wow, that's a good one. I like that. All right, nickname your parents used for you, or do they still call you?
Well, they don't still call me this, but growing up, I was Roddy, Roddy. And I still have grade school kids that I went to school with that will call me Roddy. If they see me in Coffee Break.
Oh, there it is. Yes, that is a new record, I think. 53 seconds on the Behind the Mic speed round of questions. Way to go, brother. Way to go. All right. You know what? Take those headphones off. You can go ahead and head on over to the stage real quick. And if you'd like to be a big winner, beginning next episode, you could be playing for a $20 gift certificate to Mojo Merchandise. The guest will be doing all the answering, but if they complete the speed round before the 60 seconds are over, you are the big winner. It's really simple to enter. All you have to do is go to Facebook, search Behind the Mic with Rick Hampton, and then send me a message by clicking on the send message button right there. I need your name, the city you're listening in, and then a way to contact you. You can also email those entries in if you'd like. It's btmrickhampton@gmail.com. btmrickhampton@gmail.com. You are in for a huge treat because you heard about the song earlier in the show. It was co-written by Mike Richards. He and Rodney won a Dove Award from the Gospel Music Association for Bluegrass Song of the Year back in 1998. From the Behind the Mic stage, it's Rodney Lay Jr. and his big song, He Still Looks Over Me.
I don't read the word as often as I should. I don't pray to God as often as I could, but I know enough to know His love is guaranteed. Sometimes I overlook Him, but He still looks over me. Yeah. Sometimes I overlook the fact He gave His only Son. Oh, He stood in to bear my sins, each and every one. He sends angels to protect my home and family. Sometimes I overlook Him, but He still looks over me. Yeah, I fell behind on promises I made, but He's forgiven all of my delays. Time I spend in prayer is not what it could be. Sometimes I overlook Him, but He still looks over me. Sometimes I overlook the fact He gave His only Son. Oh, He stood in to bear my sins, each and every one. He sends angels to protect my home and family. Sometimes I overlook Him, but He still looks over me. Sometimes I overlook Him, but He still looks over me.
Oh man, that right there is why that song won a Dove Award. He Still Looks Over Me by my special guest, Rodney Lay Jr. Brother, it has been a pleasure to have you on the show. Any parting advice or last-minute words?
Well, just be sure you're in church. Accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. It doesn't get any better than that because you're never alone.
Love it. Rodney, I really do appreciate you being on the show today. I love you, man. I really have enjoyed every minute that we spend together. Man, I appreciate you being here today.
I love you, brother. Thank you for having me.
This episode of Behind the Mic podcast was brought to you by Mojo Merchandise. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes. Join us next time as we go Behind the Mic with Rick Hampton.